Now we'll turn our attention to negative externalities, where consumption or production imposes a cost or a harm onto others. So think about pollution, for example. And just like with a positive externality, this means that the market will not achieve the socially optimal outcome. In this case, that's because the private market is going to underestimate the true cost of the product, and it will therefore overproduce. We'll get a quantity that's higher than the socially optimal quantity. So here on a graph, you can see we've got our private marginal cost curve, the cost of production, that's supply. We've got our private benefit curve here, that's demand. And then we've also got a marginal social cost curve, which represents the total cost to society of this product. So to get the marginal social cost curve, we'll add together the cost of production, the private marginal cost, with our marginal external cost. And you'll notice that on this graph, the marginal external cost is not constant. In fact, it's increasing as we produce more, right? The difference between these lines here is small. The more we get, the larger the external cost. So you might think about something like pollution, or where a small amount of pollution is not really noticeable, but as it gets large, like smog, for example, right? Like as you get more and more pollution, the cost of that is greater, both in terms of health and in terms of aesthetics. So this marginal external cost can be constant or increasing. All right, so here we're doing an example where we have an increasing marginal external cost, and we just want to, without any numbers at first, think about the effect of the externality on the outcome in the market and compare that to the socially optimal outcome. So the market equilibrium, of course, is where supply equals demand. So this is our market equilibrium quantity. But you can see at this point, we get here because the benefit to consumers is larger than the cost of production, but we failed to take into account this high external cost. And so we're producing too much. Really, we should take into account the external cost and produce only so long as the benefit to consumers is larger than the cost to society of producing this product. So this is the socially optimal outcome here, or at least the socially optimal quantity. You can see there's actually two prices that would get us to the socially optimal outcome. So that's why most of our discussion in this unit is focused on quantities. All right, so just like we did last time, we're going to then analyze the difference between surplus at the market equilibrium and surplus at the socially optimal outcome. You'll see here that the market has produced too much because the market underestimates the cost of production, or the cost of this product, and therefore our market equilibrium quantity will be larger than the socially optimal quantity. And that's going to result in deadweight loss at the market equilibrium. So again, we will compare total surplus in these two outcomes. So total surplus is going to be consumer surplus plus producer surplus, but now minus the external cost. At the market equilibrium, you go here the area between supply and demand out to the market equilibrium quantity. That's our consumer and producer surplus. So that's A plus B plus C plus D. And then we need to subtract off the external cost. So that's going to be the area here between our marginal social cost curve and our supply curve, which is the area C plus D plus E. And you can see that some of these areas overlap, so they will cancel out. So C and D cancel out when I add them together. And then what I'm ending up with here is A plus B minus that area E up here. Okay, so that's my total surplus at the market equilibrium. Now I'm going to erase, and we'll do total surplus at the socially optimal point. So at the socially optimal point, let's see, my consumer and producer surplus. This area between supply and demand out to the socially optimal quantity. So that's A plus B plus C. And then we need to subtract off the external cost, which is the area between marginal social cost curve and our supply curve. So we get the area of C, so we subtract off C. And then you see that overlaps with the consumer and producer surplus. So at the end of the day, what we're left with is just A plus B. So we compare these two points, these two outcomes in terms of total surplus, we can see that the market equilibrium yields less total surplus than the socially optimal point. And how much lower it is, that's deadweight loss, is equivalent to the area of triangle E. So deadweight loss here, that's our deadweight loss, is going to be equal to, now let's just highlight that on your graph. And this is what I want you to write down, okay? So our deadweight loss is equal to this triangle, E, which is going to be equal to 1/2 times the height of the triangle is the marginal external cost at the market equilibrium. And then the width of the triangle is again the difference in the quantities. Now, it's important here to make sure that you're evaluating the marginal external cost at the market equilibrium, because you can see that it's different depending on the quantity you produce in this example. In fact, it's bigger here for triangle E than it is here for triangle D. Okay, so we have to pay attention to that when we don't have a constant marginal external cost.